Lieutenant Weiss crouched on Hill 314, encircled by infantry, watching tanks flood the valley. He checked the 13-kilogram SCR-610 radio, listening to harsh static as its battery drained. It was August 1944, near Mortain, France. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, which recently burned Oradour-sur-Glane, advanced with the 2nd Panzer Division. Over 6 days, Weiss transmitted 193 fire missions for the 230th Field Artillery Battalion. The entire momentum of the front hung on this vulnerable connection. 2 massive panzer divisions stopped before an invisible barrage of shells.
Those tanks would have crushed Hill 314 under European standards. Every European army deployed forward observers, yet none granted them control over heavy guns. An officer spotted the target instantly. Then he waited endless minutes for headquarters to approve the strike. The British used forward observation officers. The German Vorgeschobener Beobachter relied on telephone wires and pre-registered zones. Soviet doctrine centralized artillery at the front command level. This hierarchy made rapid strikes against moving targets impossible. An observer commanded only his local battery. Heavy barrages required climbing the chain of command. Generals studied maps while snipers, lethal at 800 meters, hunted spotters. Coordination killed speed. From spotting armor to the first impact, 12 to 15 minutes.
That delay meant lost territory. Major Orlando Ward stripped tactical authority away from frontline gun commanders, transferring it into a centralized computing hub in Oklahoma. In 1929, Major Carlos Brewer restructured the entire artillery command hierarchy at Fort Sill. The base covered 380 square kilometers, providing massive physical space to test new mathematical models. The math moved back. A radio signal reached the newly built Fire Direction Center. Officers plotted incoming target coordinates using intersecting lines drawn across large paper firing charts. Orders reached every battery simultaneously. By 1944, these ordinary paper calculation tables dictated the survival of enemy armored divisions. No other army could coordinate a full corps through one radio transmission. That theoretical paper calculation faced its first strategic test at Guettar. 50 German tanks emerged from the morning mist straight into American infantry positions. On March 23, 1943, the 10th Panzer Division assaulted the 1st Infantry Division. 3 years earlier, these same German units easily broke French lines at Sedan, but in Tunisia, they encountered pure mathematics. The armored column hit a minefield. The tracks stopped. A deafening roar of synchronous airbursts swallowed the battlefield. Artillery shells detonated exactly 4.5 meters above the ground. Steel shrapnel rained downward into open commander hatches and exposed infantry. The coordinated fire caught them at exactly 1,370 meters. By midday, 30 of 50 German tanks burned in the desert. General George Patton watched the slaughter from a forward observation post. He saw elite grenadiers erased by invisible calculations. "They are murdering good infantry," he muttered. The paper scheme killed a tank division.
That coordinated destruction required a specific operator on the ground, turning theoretical calculations into concentrated hell. A junior lieutenant with M3 binoculars lived in the same freezing mud and died from the same shrapnel as the frontline riflemen. He detached from a 105mm howitzer battery to join forward companies. Opening his map case, he exposed a celluloid-covered firing grid, checked his compass, and tuned his SCR-610 radio. A heavy static hum confirmed his connection to the artillery battalion.
The United States mobilized 16 million personnel, yet the speed of state firepower depended entirely on the qualifications of these specific lieutenants. The most dangerous individual on the Western Front carried no heavy weapons and was not officially an infantryman. He carried an SCR-536 radio just to talk to local platoon leaders. Despite acting as the sole conduit for the artillery corps, Army bureaucracy denied him the combat infantryman badge. The Army denied him a badge, but gave him control over firepower unavailable to an entire infantry platoon. 40 men with rifles covered perhaps 150 meters of ground. One man holding a map saturated that same area with corps-level fire. It meant 270 to 2,700 kilograms of high explosives per minute. He dictated coordinates. 12 to 36 howitzers answered. They included massive 203 millimeter guns. Each shell weighed roughly 90 kilograms. Their impacts gouged craters several meters deep. This math created a mechanism of suppression that broke enemy morale. Fire direction centers calculated the exact flight time for every individual battery. A forward battery required 20 seconds of flight. A rear unit required 40. Officers counted down backwards over the radio. Every gunner pulled the lanyard at the exact synchronized second.
The math guaranteed that every shell crossed the target plane within a 3-second window. A standard M1 howitzer fired its projectile at nearly 400 meters per second. There was no ranging shot, no warning round to send infantry diving into trenches. The air remained completely silent for the final second of flight. The very first sound the enemy heard was the full weight of the artillery corps arriving simultaneously on their position.
Waves of German paratroopers surged up the slope. Continuous howitzer fire smashed into their ranks. The mathematics of the synchronous strike passed its first strategic test here. This barrage paralyzed a tank army vanguard for 20 hours. It happened on December 16, 1944, at Lanzerith Ridge. The 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte, formed the elite spearhead of the German offensive. Command expected a breakthrough in hours. Instead, they stopped. Lieutenant Warren Springer sat inside a mounted jeep. He held the microphone of an SCR 610 radio. Springer dictated exact grid coordinates to the 99th Infantry Division. Artillery batteries kilometers away adjusted their elevation. Heavy shells slammed into the hillside. Paratroopers hit the dirt and ceased their advance. The cold December air over the village filled with the sharp smell of cordite. The infantry could not move. The armor waited idling behind them. By dusk, 92 attackers lay dead or wounded on the slope. The position eventually fell, but the delay destroyed the German logistical timetable. Out of the 22 American defenders holding that ridge, exactly 4 were artillerymen equipped with radios. 20 hours. 4 radiomen locked down a single Belgian ridge, but 3 days later, this communication grid swallowed the entire Dome-Buchenbach front, 10,000 fired shells in 8 hours. The 1st Infantry Division held a sector known as the Hot Corner against the 12th SS Panzer Division. Between December 19th and the 22nd of 1944, the volume of fire escalated daily. Brigadier General Clift Andrus merged his organic batteries with the 99th Division guns and 5th Corps reinforcements. On December 21st alone, forward observers directed 300 separate fire missions. Then came December 22nd. The ground vibrated heavily beneath the firing positions. Individual shots vanished into a continuous industrial thunder. Days later, the Graves Registration Service walked the ruined landscape and cataloged 782 German corpses. The network operated on pure tactical logic. One grid coordinate raised every available core barrel. To call those shells, the forward observer first had to stay alive. First Lieutenant Erwin Blonder moved between observation posts under deliberate sniper fire. He operated with the 141st Infantry Regiment in the Vosges Mountains on October 24, 1944. 600 men spent 6 days completely surrounded. The enemy recognized the threat of his radio. In an archived letter home, Blonder described the incoming rounds. A 7.92 mm Mauser bullet breaks the sound barrier, creating a distinct snap passing the target. An internet myth claims marksmen ignored spotters. They hunted him down. The hunt for spotters peaked during Operation Lüttich. The fate of the Normandy breakout hung in the balance. Weiss requested 193 artillery strikes over 6 days of encirclement. On August 6, 1944, German armor launched a counteroffensive. Hundreds of tanks moved west to isolate the United States Third Army at Avranches and sever the supply routes. The 2nd Panzer and 2nd SS Panzer divisions crashed into the 30th Infantry Sector. This strategic thrust collapsed against Hill 314 near Mortain. Lieutenant Robert Weiss sat trapped at the summit. The 2nd Battalion held the line alongside him. Weiss operated a portable SCR-610 radio. The device controlled the artillery fire over the entire valley. Weiss pulled the heavy battery pack closer. The cells were dying one by one. He dictated the next coordinate grid. Corps artillery batteries waited behind the American lines.
The 188th and 957th Heavy Artillery Battalions loaded 155mm shells. Weiss pressed his handset switch again. A fading hiss of static bled from the dying radio speaker. The transmission was failing. Battalion Commander Louis Weimann pressed his receiver tight against his ear. He caught the target numbers through the heavy interference. Weimann confirmed the barrage.
The myth about sparing radio men shatters against 3rd Mountain Division interrogations. Why did elite marksmen hesitate to shoot observers? Because a miss guaranteed an immediate strike from a whole battalion. Matthias Hetzenauer, Sepp Auterberger, and Helmut Wernsberger were the deadliest Wehrmacht shooters. Their captured files stated the target priority clearly. Observers first, heavy weapons second, commanders third. The 3rd Mountain Division survived the Eastern Front. Their troops were elite, but their combat experience meant nothing against an industrial artillery response. It was not chivalry that protected American radio men. It was cold mathematics. A sniper pulled the trigger, but the bullet missed. A brief muzzle flash revealed the position. The radio man instantly pressed the transmitter. He relayed grid coordinates through the static interference. A battalion of 18 howitzers received the call. Within 2 minutes, the response arrived. The roar of falling shells drowned out the forest. High explosives erased the entire square. Shooting at an observer was a suicide note. German prisoners interrogated in 1944 feared one thing: not American infantry, nor their tanks. They feared the artillery. General George Patton summarized this geopolitical reality. He stated he did not need to explain who won the war, because the artillery did. Yet the artillery superiority that commanders praised ended exactly where physical connections broke. During the first 48 hours of the Ardennes offensive, weather grounded the L-4 Piper Cub observation planes. The deadliest targeting network lost all efficiency against wet trees and low clouds. Damp branches and thick fog paralyzed the global industrial power of an entire continent. This geographic trap defined the Hurtgen Forest, covering roughly 129 square kilometers of dense thickets that ruined visual reconnaissance. Rain degraded radio networks, while shells severed wire lines faster than troops could splice them. Consequently, the 99th Division artillery could not fire on the German breakthrough at Hoffen. Stripped of his radio, the lieutenant lowered his hands and gripped his binoculars.
Without radios, spotters were blind. This links 1944 to modern doctrine, where a 13 Foxtrot coordinates artillery and strike drones. August 1944 hit Hill 314. A lieutenant unfolded a map while the radio dug into his spine. Batteries faded before advancing Panzer divisions. He pressed the handset through static. On the way,